My mother texted me, "You're banned from Thanksgiving until you apologize to your cousin." No explanation, no emotion, just that line glowing cold against the dark. I stared at it for a full minute, then opened my banking app and started closing every autopay tied to their names, mortgage, phone, electricity. 3 days later, while they sat around the turkey I'd stopped funding, the silence finally broke. Notifications poured in calls, messages panic, but that was just the start. Before I tell you everything, hit like and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Have you ever been cut off by the very people you kept alive? People talk about family like it's a built-in safety net. No matter what happens, they'll catch you. Mine never did. On the outside, the lanes looked perfect. White painted porch, matching sweaters and Christmas photos, mom's apple pie cooling by the window. But that perfection was a stage, and I was the one sweeping the floor behind the curtain. I grew up in that house knowing which bills were late before I even knew how to drive. When I was 12, Mom would slide envelopes across the table and say, "Harper, you're good with numbers. Help me keep track." Blake, my cousin, but raised like my brother, got new sneakers for doing well in school. I got a stack of receipts and a pencil. That was the deal, his comfort for my competence. Years later, nothing changed. Mom still called me the practical one, which really meant the one who paid. Dad stayed quiet, always glancing at her before speaking as if words required permission. Aunt Carol floated in and out with her family, first slogans smiling like a politician. And Blake, our golden boy, showed up to every gathering bragging about his new car, his bonuses, his nights out. Behind those smiles was my credit card on file for the family phone plan, my name on the utility account, my overtime paying for Dad's medication after surgery. Mom never asked outright, she just assumed. "You understand responsibility," she'd say, or "You know how much this means to the family." Those phrases were softer than commands, but heavier than chains. I said yes because I thought love required it. If I kept everything running, maybe they'd finally see me. Maybe they'd remember I existed beyond the bills. Thanksgiving had always been my way of holding us together. I'd shop for groceries, roast the turkey, even decorate the table with the same pine cone centerpiece Mom liked. Last year, she said, "You make it feel like home." I held on to that sentence for months like it was proof that I mattered. So when the group chat lit up this year, messages flying about who's bringing what, who's invited, and my name wasn't there, I thought it was a mistake. I waited. Then I typed, "What time should I come?" The typing bubbles appeared, disappeared, then Blake replied, "Limited seating this year. Maybe Christmas if you behave." The silence after that felt like a verdict. No one defended me. Not Mom, not Dad. Just dots blinking, then nothing. My stomach twisted, but my mind stayed calm, too calm. Because deep down, I'd seen this coming. Every favor I gave was another way to make myself disposable. They didn't need me at the table. They needed my card on file. When Mom's text came the next morning, "You're banned from Thanksgiving until you apologize to your cousin," it wasn't a shock. It was confirmation. Years of quiet sacrifice had bought me a front row seat to my own exclusion. That's when something inside me started to shift. I didn't cry. I didn't call. I just opened my laptop, looked at the accounts I'd been holding together for them, and thought maybe it's time they learn what life costs without me. The first crack showed up that night, not in a shout, but in silence. The group chat stayed quiet, no one checking in, no one asking if I was okay. Just photos Blake's girlfriend showing off her new dress, Aunt Carol posting family. Is everything like she hadn't watched mine push me out? I tried calling Mom once, half hoping she'd laugh and say it was a misunderstanding. Instead, I heard the sound of dishes, clinking laughter echoing in the background. "You're not coming until you apologize," she said, voice clipped, rehearsed. For what exactly? For embarrassing Blake at his promotion dinner. You know how you get. I could hear Uncle Ray laughing somewhere behind her budget cop strikes again, and everyone joined in like it was a family tradition. I gripped the phone tighter. Embarrassing him, I asked why he keeps forgetting to pay back what he borrows. That's not embarrassing. That's math. The laughter stopped. Mom's voice lowered to a hiss. "You're making a scene. This isn't about money, it's about respect. No, Mom, I said, steady, almost calm. It's always been about money. A long pause. Then a door slammed on her end. The call dropped. I stared at the screen for a long time, feeling that strange mix of heat and cold crawl up my chest. I wasn't angry anymore, just awake. The next morning, Aunt Carol texted, "Don't make this about money, sweetie. Family comes first." Then she posted a photo online, long table candles glowing, everyone smiling. Everyone but me. That image burned itself into my brain, not because they forgot me, but because they didn't even notice I was gone. Thanksgiving Day arrived like a dare. My phone stayed face down on the counter. Outside, the world smelled like roasted turkey and cinnamon, the kind of scent that used to mean safety. I drove past their house once, not to spy, just to see. Through the window, I caught flashes of silverware, the glow of the chandelier laughter, spilling through half-open blinds. For a second, I thought about knocking. Then I saw it, a foil-covered plate, sitting on the porch like a peace offering to a stray dog. A text followed minutes later. "We saved you a plate. Porch pickup." I didn't touch it. I left it there for the neighborhood cat who pawed at the edge until the gravy leaked through. The next day, Black Friday, I tried to make things normal. I walked to the bakery near my apartment, ordered coffee and a bagel. Aunt Carol happened to be there like fate had a cruel sense of humor. She smiled too wide. "Harper, honey, heard about Thanksgiving. Don't take it so personal. You've always been sensitive." Then turning to the cashier, she added, "She's just touchy about success. Comes with being the single one." The cashier's smile faltered. A woman behind me whispered, "Ouch." The air in the bakery thickened heavy with secondhand pity. I walked out without my bagel, sat in my car until my hands stopped shaking. Minutes later, my phone buzzed, Blake calling. I let it ring once, twice, then answered. "Hey," he said, casual as if nothing had happened. "Think you can spot me 600, I'll pay Friday." I didn't answer. "You know, family takes care of each other," he added. And right then it hit me. Family didn't take care of each other. I took care of them. And the more I gave, the less I existed. That was the moment something solidified in my chest. Not rage, not revenge yet, but a clarity sharp enough to cut. By Saturday morning, the house was quiet enough to hear the fridge hum. I sat at my kitchen table, laptop, open bank statements glowing back at me like an accusation. Every dollar I'd spent for them stared in neat black lines: mortgage payments, prescriptions, co-pays, the internet, the phone plan. Hundreds of transactions that together spelled one word: used. I started writing everything down: dates, amounts, who asked, why, Dad's truck tires, Blake's rent again, Mom's insurance lapse. The list stretched for pages. I wasn't angry, I was methodical. For once my numbers weren't saving them, they were saving me. At the top of the document, I typed, "What they don't know is about to free me." That afternoon, I called Grace, my mentor, from work. She was the only person who'd ever told me, "You deserve peace." When I slid the folder across the cafe table, she flipped through the receipt slowly. Her nails tapped the paper. "Harper," she said finally, "you're not their daughter anymore. You're their ATM. It's time to close the account." I looked out the window at people walking by, scarves fluttering in the wind. They all looked normal, untouched by the weight of family. "What does closing it look like? Simple," she said. "Remove yourself from every bill. Cut your cards off their accounts. Transfer utilities back to their names. Do it quietly. Let the system deliver the message for you." It sounded almost surgical, clean, bloodless. Exactly what I needed. That night, I opened my banking app. My fingers didn't even tremble. Step by step, I took my life back, removed autopay from the mortgage, called the phone company and split the line, transferred the electric account, changed every password they'd ever used. Each click was like exhaling. By Sunday, my phone was still silent. I pictured them laughing, full and smug after Thanksgiving, unaware that the lights they ate under were now on borrowed time. Monday morning, my email pinged a notice from the mortgage company. Payment failed. I imagined Mom's confusion, her brow furrowing as she checked the balance, then calling the bank, her voice tightening. An hour later, Blake posted a photo on social media leftovers spread across the table captioned, "Real loyalty isn't about money." I smiled. It wasn't rage anymore. It was relief. That evening, while I was buying light bulbs at the hardware store, I heard a familiar voice in the next aisle, Uncle Ray. He was laughing, telling someone, "We've got her in line now. She'll come crawling back." I stood there holding the box of bulbs, heartbeat steady. For once, I didn't feel the urge to prove anything. I just knew what came next. Tuesday afternoon, Mom's name flashed on my phone. I didn't pick up. Her voicemail started calm-ended sharp. "Since you won't apologize, don't bother coming for Christmas either, and don't embarrass us with your spreadsheets." I listened twice, then deleted it. The following day, the calls turned frantic. Mortgage, electric, internet, all hitting at once. When I finally answered, Mom's voice cracked through the line. The house payment didn't clear Harper. "What did you do?" I felt the stillness settle inside me, deep and certain. "I'll come by," I said softly, "and I'll bring the binder." The kitchen smelled like stale coffee and panic when I walked in. The blinds were half closed, letting thin strips of winter light cut across the table, where Mom sat, fingers locked together, like she was praying for the first time in years. Dad was beside her face, pale eyes heavy from nights without sleep. The air felt thick, like everything I'd ever swallowed back was still floating here, waiting for me. I placed the binder on the table, just a cheap black cover, but when it hit the wood, the sound made both of them flinch. Mom straightened, voice clipped. "What is this?" "The truth," I said. My tone surprised even me. Steady, not angry. "Just done." Dad rubbed his temples. "Harper, we didn't mean for things to get this far." I met his eyes. "You meant for me to pay. You just didn't mean for it to stop." He looked away first. Mom leaned forward, her voice soft but poisonous. "This isn't you, Harper. You've always cared about family, about responsibility." "That's what I thought too," I said, flipping the binder open. Pages of receipts, transfers, statements, all printed, labeled, highlighted. But somewhere along the way, responsibility turned into servitude. She blinked, confused for a second, then defensive. "You're overreacting." "Really?" I turned a page toward her. Mortgage covered 8 times in 2 years. Electric bill 4, insurance, groceries, Blake's temporary rent. Her face stayed frozen, but her knuckles whitened. From the hallway came footsteps. Blake appeared, phone in hand, expression already smug. "What's going on?" Mom exhaled like she'd found her savior. "Your cousin's having one of her dramatic fits again." He smirked at me. "Still playing accountant, huh?" I met his stare. "Actually, yeah. And the math finally makes sense." He frowned. I slid a clear sleeve toward him. Screenshots of messages, bank transfers, every I'll Venmo Friday he never followed through on. His face shifted, the confidence slipping like oil on glass. "You're really keeping track of all this?" He scoffed, voice cracking just enough to give him away. "Someone had to." I leaned back. "You call it loyalty. I call it theft." He turned to Mom. "You're seriously letting her do this after everything I've done for this family?" Dad barked a bitter laugh. "Everything she's done, Blake, everything she paid for, you just took it." Blake's mouth snapped shut. Mom's eyes darted between us like she didn't know whose side to stand on. "Enough," she finally said, her voice rising. "We can fix this. Harper, you can't just walk away from family." "Yes, I can." I gathered the binder back into my arms. "Because you already walked away from me." Her eyes filled not with guilt, but pride wounded beyond repair. "You're making me look bad." "No, Mom," I said quietly. "You did that when you banned me from Thanksgiving." The room went still. Somewhere outside a dog barked, then silence again. Blake slammed his hand on the table. "You can't just stop paying. The bills are in your name." "They were," I said. "Not anymore. You'll be getting new account notices this week. Congratulations, now you're officially adults." He gaped. "You'll ruin us." I shrugged. "I was never supposed to be your savior." Mom's voice trembled. "You can't just abandon us like this." "That's the funny thing," I said, my voice low but cutting. You didn't see it, but you abandoned me years ago. You just kept cashing the checks." Dad finally spoke, his tone hollow. "We didn't know Harper." I looked at him. Really. Looked at him. The man who'd spent years watching her control everything, too scared to intervene. "You didn't want to know." He nodded slowly, shame settling in his shoulders. Blake took a step closer. "You think you're better than us now? You think money makes you right?" I almost laughed. "No, Blake. I think honesty does." He sneered, the last of his confidence turning mean. "You're pathetic. Who's going to be there for you now? You'll end up alone counting your pennies." Maybe I said reaching for the binder, but at least they'll be mine. He froze, the words landing like a slap. I turned to leave. The air behind me buzzed with everything unsaid: regret, anger, disbelief. At the door, Dad's voice stopped me. "What about Christmas?" I paused, hand on the doorknob. The question sounded small, like a habit he didn't know how to break. "I'll see how I feel," I said, and walked out. Outside, the sun was sharp, the air biting cold. My breath fogged in front of me, every exhale lighter than the last. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about bills or balance sheets or whether I'd be invited back. Halfway to my car, my phone buzzed Blake again. I ignored it. Then again and again. When I reached the car, I opened the messages. "You went too far. Mom's crying. Fix this." Then another, "Please." I watched the dots pulse on the screen, then disappear. I typed one line and deleted it. There was nothing left to say. Driving home, the streets blurred into streaks of gold and gray. I turned onto my block, parked, and just sat there for a while, hands on the steering wheel, heart quiet. For years, I'd been terrified of silence. Now it felt like peace. That night, I left the binder on my shelf, not as a weapon, but as proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy or cruel or ungrateful. Proof that I'd simply stopped paying for love that had an invoice attached. The next morning, the group chat pinged once and then went dead. No more messages, no more jokes, no more budget cop emojis, just emptiness. And I realized something emptiness isn't always loss. Sometimes it's space. Space to rebuild, to breathe, to belong only to yourself. The days after felt strangely still, like the world had turned down its volume. For the first time in my adult life, every bill that left my account had my name on it, and only mine. No surprise withdrawals, no frantic calls, no quiet guilt humming in the background. Just peace. A week later, Dad called. I almost didn't answer, but something in me softened. His voice was different, slow, careful. "We set up the autopay," he said. Then after a pause, "I'm sorry, Harper. I should have said something sooner. You didn't deserve that." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded into the silence. The apology wasn't perfect, but it was real. Mom reached out next in smaller ways. A text, "Made pasta tonight. No expectations, just dinner." I stared at it for a while before replying, "Maybe next week." When I finally went, the kitchen felt smaller, quieter. She didn't bring up the binder. She didn't apologize. But the hug at the door lasted longer than it used to, and that was enough. Blake never called. His silence was loud, but I didn't chase it. Maybe he was still angry, or maybe he finally had to look at himself without my help propping him up. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. That night, I made tea, sat by the window, and opened my planner. No numbers tied to someone else's name. No invisible debts, just mine. For the first time, my life finally balanced. Family isn't measured by who sits at the table. It's measured by who shows up when you have nothing left to give. I spent years buying my place with silence, but peace came the day I stopped paying for love. If this story hit close to home, tell me in the comments. Have you ever had to draw a line with family? And don't forget to subscribe. Your voice matters here. Don't listen to her. She's always been a fraud. My father's words cut through the restaurant right in front of 30 relatives. My mother agreed with a single nod, as if I was nothing but a liar at their celebration. I didn't fight back. I smiled, poured another glass of wine, and let them keep eating, never suspecting the truth. Because every chair, every plate, every toast that night belonged to me. 1 month later, when they walked into a dinner, I arranged their perfect story collapsed. Before I tell you how hit like and comment where you're watching from, have you ever been erased by your own family? My name is Aria Bennett. I'm 31 years old, and if you only knew me through my parents' words, you'd think I was some kind of cautionary tale. A woman who never quite measured up, who spent her life inventing stories to feel important. That's the narrative they've been repeating since I was a kid, and for a long time, I let them write it. On the surface, the Bennetts were the kind of family people envied. My dad, Robert, carried himself like the king of a suburban castle. My mom, Linda, played the part of the gracious hostess. My sister, Natalie, 4 years younger, was the shining centerpiece. And me, I was the other one. The one people forgot to mention in introductions, the one who smiled tightly in family photos while the spotlight was fixed somewhere else. The favoritism wasn't subtle, it was baked into everything. Christmas morning, 1999, I was 7 years old. Natalie ripped into wrapping paper and uncovered a brand new pink bicycle with streamers on the handlebars and a silver bell. I unwrapped a backpack for school and a box of pencils. Mom leaned down and whispered, "Santa knows Natalie's been extra good this year." Even at 7, I understood. Natalie was special. I was practical. Years later, when I brought home a report card with straight A's, my parents tacked it to the fridge without comment. 2 weeks later, Natalie managed to drag her math grade from a D to a C+. Dad beamed like she'd won an Olympic medal. "This shows real improvement, sweetheart," he said, sweeping her off for ice cream. I asked if I could come too. He didn't even look at me when he answered. "You didn't improve anything, Aria. Your grades are always good." That was the moment I learned that consistency meant invisibility. High school should have been my time. Junior year. I won the state academic decathlon, first in our family to ever achieve something like that. The ceremony was on a Saturday afternoon, but that same morning, Dad dropped his fork over breakfast and announced, "We need to get to Natalie's tennis match." I tried to remind them about my award. "Don't be selfish," Mom snapped. "Your sister needs our support." I stood on that stage alone, clapping for myself, while my family sat 30 yards away, watching Natalie lose in straight sets. When I brought the trophy home, Dad barely looked up from his newspaper. "That's nice, sweetie. Can you start dinner? Your mom's tired from the match." By college, I knew better than to expect anything. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through school, graduated summa cum laude, the first Bennett to ever walk across that stage. They didn't come. Natalie was throwing a housewarming party the same weekend, and apparently that was more important. I walked alone, gripping the diploma in my hand, while my parents toasted her new apartment. That was my family. Their love was loud for Natalie, and their silence was deafening for me. You'd think after college I would have stopped hoping, but old habits die hard. Every time something good happened in my life, some small part of me wanted to pick up the phone and hear my parents say, "We're proud of you." But the pattern never broke, it just sharpened with age. When I bought my first car, I pulled into their driveway, eager for once to show them something tangible. Mom barely glanced at it before turning the conversation toward Natalie's new haircut. When I got my second promotion, I called to share the news. Dad cut me off midway. "That's great, Aria. Did you hear Natalie's dating a guy from her office?" Real catch. My achievements were background noise to whatever Natalie happened to be doing that week. Whenever I tried to push back to tell them how invisible they made me feel, I got the same script. "Stop being so sensitive. You're too old to need this much attention. Why can't you just be happy for your sister?" They turned my hurt into evidence that I was dramatic needy, the exact caricature they painted for the family. And the more they said it, the quieter I became. So I stopped sharing. When I signed the lease on my first studio apartment, I didn't mention how I was juggling 3 jobs to afford it. When I started studying real estate and business management late at night, I didn't tell them. When I scraped together every tip, every birthday check, every spare dollar to save for a down payment, they had no idea. My life became a closed book because the people who should have cared most never wanted to read it anyway. Meanwhile, Natalie's every milestone turned into a family-wide celebration. A new job, a vacation, even employee of the month at her entry-level office gig, those were champagne-worthy. Meanwhile, I was bartending until 2 a.m., building spreadsheets in the morning and learning to patch drywall on the weekends. The irony was brutal. While they called me dramatic, I was quietly building the foundation of something they couldn't even imagine. The breaking point came last year when Natalie got engaged. The engagement party was treated like a royal coronation. I watched them beam at her fiancé like he'd delivered the second coming, while I stood in the corner with a polite smile plastered on my face. A month later, they booked the biggest dinner, yet a celebration of Natalie's engagement with 30 relatives invited, and they chose my restaurant. That night, as I watched them laugh and toast, oblivious to the fact that the venue belonged to me, I realized how deeply the narrative had sunk in. They weren't just dismissing me, they were rewriting me as a fraud in front of everyone. My father's voice calling me a liar, my mother's nod, sealing the judgment. It was a public execution of whatever little dignity I still had with them. And yet, as the humiliation burned through me, something unexpected stirred. Not just anger, not just hurt, a resolve. If they wanted a show, I was going to give them one. After that night, I went home and sat in the dark, still in the same dress I'd worn to their celebration. The smell of wine clung to my hair. My hands shook from holding back tears in public. For years, I'd let them call me dramatic, too sensitive, a liar. But this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about truth. I picked up my phone and called the one person in my family who never joined the chorus against me. "Emma," I whispered when she answered. Her voice snapped like fire through the receiver. I saw what they did. It was disgusting. "It wasn't anything new," I said, trying to sound steady. "That's the problem. They've been doing this your whole life, and tonight everyone saw it." There was silence between us, heavy but different, like an understanding had finally crystallized. I didn't have to explain the years of favoritism. Emma had witnessed it. She'd seen every Christmas, every report card, every time I got brushed aside. For once, someone else was angry on my behalf. I took a breath. "Emma, I need to tell you something. Something they don't know. What is it? I own that restaurant, the whole building, everything they were celebrating in tonight, it's mine." The line went quiet. Then came her laugh, not cruel, but sharp with satisfaction. "You're serious? 3 years now," I said. "They've been eating at my tables, drinking my wine, humiliating me in my own house." Emma's tone shifted to steel. "So, what's the plan?" I looked around my apartment. Bare walls still hung with cheap frames, the space where I'd eaten countless peanut butter sandwiches just to save money. The plan had already begun forming in my head during dessert at the party. "I'm going to show them," I said, not by screaming, not by fighting, by making them sit down and face the truth they've been denying. Emma didn't hesitate. "Then I'll be there. I won't let them twist it around on you." The next morning, I walked into my restaurant, not as an owner hidden behind the curtain, but as a woman plotting her reveal. I asked James, my manager, to prepare documents, deeds, licenses, proof. He didn't even blink. His loyalty was steady, almost protective. Over the next 3 weeks, I arranged the dinner. Fresh flowers, candles, personalized menus embossed in gold. I wanted no room for doubt, no corner for them to claim it was just another illusion of mine. When the night came, they would sit in my house again. But this time, I wouldn't be invisible. This time, their story would collapse, and mine would rise. The night of the dinner arrived with the kind of crisp chill that carries whispers of winter. My restaurant glowed like a beacon on the corner, gold light spilling through the tall glass windows, the hum of jazz floating just beneath the sound of the city. I stood by the entrance, steadying my breath as one car after another pulled up. Natalie was the first to walk in her diamond ring, catching the light like she wanted everyone to notice. My parents followed close behind Robert with his stiff shoulders, Linda with her rehearsed smile. The rest of the family filed in uncles, aunts, cousins, all marveling at the flowers on each table, the soft flicker of candles, the embossed menus with their names written in gold. "Wow, Aria." Aunt Carol said, her eyes darting around. "How on earth did you manage this?" I smiled. I have my ways. The truth was written all over the room. My staff moved with precision, attentive to every detail. James checked in with me quietly, his hand resting on the leather folder tucked under his arm. I nodded. We were ready. Dinner began with small talk, the scrape of silverware, the clink of glasses. Natalie soaked up the attention, retelling the story of her proposal like it was a fairy tale no one had heard before. My parents chimed in with adoring laughs, filling every silence with more praise for their golden child. I sat at the other end of the table, calm, silent, waiting. Halfway through the main course, Grandma Rose leaned toward me. "Sweetheart," she whispered, her weathered hand brushing mine. "This feels like the family dinners we used to have. Before everything." Her eyes searched mine with a kind of pride I hadn't seen since childhood. "You've done something beautiful." That single sentence grounded me. It reminded me why I was here, not for revenge alone, but for recognition that I wasn't invisible. Then it happened. My father stood wine glass, raised his voice, cutting across the room just as it had weeks before. "I think we should all acknowledge Arya's effort tonight." He glanced at me with a smirk. "She's always had a flair for appearances, hasn't she?" Laughter rippled uneasily. My mother followed, nodding. "Yes, she's always been imaginative. You know she's been telling people she runs businesses, owns property. We all know she tends to exaggerate." I felt the familiar sting, but this time it didn't pierce me. This time I was ready. I rose slowly, the room falling quiet. My heels clicked against the hardwood as I crossed to the service station. James met me halfway, the leather folder in his hands. "Ladies and gentlemen," James said, his voice professional and clear, "it's my honor to introduce you to the owner of this establishment, the woman who built it from the ground up, Miss Arya Bennett." The room froze. Forks hung midair. My father's glass stopped halfway to his lips. My mother's face drained of color. James laid the documents on the table, property, deeds, business licenses, tax forms, all bearing my name. For 3 years, she has run this restaurant, expanded it, and turned it into one of the most sought-after venues in the city. Whispers rose around the table. Uncle Mike leaned forward. "This is real, it's real," I said softly, my voice carrying more weight than if I'd shouted. "Every plate you've eaten, from every glass you've raised in celebration was mine to give." My father shook his head, muttering, "Impossible." "Actually, it isn't," Emma spoke up. Her eyes locked on him. "You've been tearing her down while she's been building this. The only fraud here is the way you've treated her." The air crackled. Aunt Carol gasped. "Arya, you own all this." "Yes," I answered. "And I've stayed quiet year after year while you called me dramatic, attention-seeking, worthless. I smiled when you dismissed me. I kept building while you were too busy to notice." My mother opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "You told me to stop being sensitive, to stop needing attention. But this isn't about attention. It's about truth. And tonight, the truth sits in front of you." The silence was heavy, broken only by Grandma Rose's slow clap. "Well done, sweetheart, well done." One by one, other voices joined in. Cousin Sarah. "This explains so much, Uncle Mike." I always thought the favoritism was wrong. Even the younger cousins spoke shy but firm, admitting they'd noticed how I was treated. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. My father tried to recover his tone, desperate. "Arya, we didn't mean to hurt you." "Yes, you did," I replied, calm as stone. "Every time you dismissed my success, every time you told me I was lying, every time you told the family I was nothing, you meant it. Don't pretend otherwise now." Linda reached for my hand, her voice trembling. "We're sorry if we seemed unsupportive." "You weren't unsupportive," I said, pulling back. "You were cruel. There's a difference." The table erupted in murmurs. My parents sat stunned, their kingdom of denial crumbling. And I sat taller than I ever had, not because I'd humiliated them, but because I'd finally refused to let them rewrite me. The dinner carried on, but everything had changed. Relatives approached me one by one with apologies, admiration, regret. Emma squeezed my shoulder, a silent vow that she'd always stand with me. Grandma Rose leaned close and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Arya, not just for this, but for the grace you showed, For the first time, I wasn't the forgotten daughter. I was the woman who built her own table and made the family sit at it. By the time dessert arrived, the balance in the room had shifted completely. No one was hanging on Natalie's every word anymore. They were watching me, listening to me asking questions about how I built the place from nothing. For years, I'd been treated like a ghost at family gatherings, but that night, I was flesh and bone, undeniable. My grandmother insisted on sitting beside me, her frail hand wrapped around mine, as if anchoring me in this new reality. "You don't need their approval, Arya," she whispered. "You never did." My parents stayed mostly silent. Their earlier smugness dissolved into an awkward stiffness. They tried to offer one last apology as people were leaving, but it came out thin, rehearsed, like they were more concerned about how they looked than about what they'd done. I didn't argue. I didn't forgive. I just let their words hang in the air, meaningless now that the truth was out. Later, when the room emptied and candles burned low, I walked slowly through the space I had created. My space. For the first time, I felt free of the invisible leash they'd tied around me my whole life. The revenge hadn't been loud or messy. It had been simple, undeniable, final. Sometimes the best revenge isn't shouting or fighting. It's succeeding without their permission. I didn't build this restaurant to prove anything to Robert or Linda Bennett. I built it because I believed in myself when no one else would. That night, the family saw me for who I really am, not the forgotten daughter, not the liar they painted me to be, but the woman who built her own empire. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have supported you, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one.